4 defensive strikes. The strikes target Iranian missiles in storage depots or launchers. Starmer stressed Britain did not participate in the US-Israel airstrikes that killed Iran's supreme leader. He added that the UK will not join further offensive strikes but must protect British citizens in the region. Iran has retaliated with missile attacks on airports and hotels hosting British nationals. Starmer said the decision aligns with international law and collective self-defense to safeguard allies. Let's take a listen into the statements.
Yesterday, I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. Over the last 2 days, Iran has launched sustained attacks across the region at countries who did not attack them. They've hit airports and hotels where British citizens are staying. This is clearly a dangerous situation. Our decision that the UK would not be involved with the strikes on Iran was deliberate, not least because we believe that the best way forward for the region and for the world is a negotiated settlement, one in which Iran agrees to give up any aspirations to develop a nuclear weapon. But Iran is striking British interests nonetheless and putting British people at huge risk, along with our allies across the region. That is the situation we face today. Our partners in the Gulf have asked us to do more to defend them, and it is my duty to protect British lives. The United States has requested permission to use British bases for that specific and limited defensive purpose. We have taken the decision to accept this request to prevent Iran firing missiles across the region, killing innocent civilians, putting British lives at risk, and hitting countries that have not been involved. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defense of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region. And we will also bring experts from Ukraine together with our own experts to help Gulf partners shoot down Iranian drones attacking them. I want to be very clear. We all remember the mistakes of Iraq, and we have learned those lessons. We were not involved in the initial strikes on Iran, and we will not join offensive action now. But Iran is pursuing a scorched earth strategy, so we are supporting the collective self-defense of our allies and our people in the region, because that is our duty to the British.
The British Prime Minister there responding to the ongoing escalations in the Middle East. But this conflict has economic ramifications across the world. Oil prices surged today amid the escalating military conflict in the Middle East, with Brent crude rising 4.5% to $76.07 per barrel. US stocks slid, with Asian markets reacting to the rising tension. US President Donald Trump suggested the conflict could last another month, further stoking concerns over oil supply disruptions, especially through the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, the US dollar and gold saw gains as investors sought safer assets. OPEC Plus agreed to a modest production boost, but analysts warn the oil price surge could reignite inflation globally, affecting businesses and consumers alike. David K. Johnston joins us once again to discuss these economic implications. David, the Strait of Hormuz, of course, a key choking point which Iran has warned now the world trade supply to avoid. The economic ramifications of this war, the oil market obviously disrupted. What more can we expect, and how might this conflict affect all of us, even around the world, after these developments?
Well, oil prices have always been and are likely to always be very volatile. We've had in my lifetime oil at $10 a barrel, West Texas Intermediate, and we've had it at $120 a barrel. And the world keeps going on. So there'll be some economic damage just in terms of a blip in oil prices for a while, but that's not going to be a significant driver of anything. More important, I think, will turn out to be the efforts by the Iranians to create chaos and fear. That's the reason they have sent out these missiles into places like hotels in Dubai, which is basically a resort and trading city. And you notice that Prime Minister Starmer, whose position is not very strong with Parliament, repeatedly seemed to be appealing to the Iranians. We didn't take part in this. We're only defending ourselves. We're only defending our citizens. We didn't take part in this. It would be surprising if the incoming Iranian regime parses things so carefully and legalistically as Keir Starmer hopes.
Dr. Chadha, can Iran effectively put a full blockade on the Strait of Hormuz? Even without one, how can tanker attacks, insurance hikes and shipping delays drive these prices higher as we are seeing now?
I mean, that's precisely what I think they're doing at the moment. They're trying to hold oil and shipping trade and energy trade ransom for the entire world in some way, and they know they could do it because geostrategically their positioning allows them to do it close to the Strait of Hormuz. And as long as they do maintain the capabilities, whether it is in terms of actually striking the oil vessels or maintaining the fear of striking the oil vessels, I mean, we are going to continue to see countries across the world impacted. But there's another angle to this. I mean, we also need to think about a lot of other oil importers from across the globe who are not very closely related to the region. I mean, I'm sitting here in Japan. I do know that Japan also depends heavily on energy trade from the Middle East. And for a country like that, this is spelling doom. A lot of economic activity is likely to be in some way impacted one way or another. Consumers are going to be impacted one way or another. Talking about countries like India, who have maintained for the longest time very close relations with Iran, have been of recent silent about this US attacks on and Israeli attacks on Iran. So we are seeing a lot of changes in terms of geopolitical positionings of nations. We are looking at how they probably already had factored this conflict in, but now they'll have to recalculate as to how and what could be their potential sources. We talk in geopolitics and geoeconomics about diversification of sources of energy, and now that pool seems to be running dry. There are very few players who are not engaged in one conflict or another. There are very few countries or companies that are probably not on the sanctions list, which in one way or another does end up pointing towards probably Western partners, those that are non-Russia and non-Iran, possibly benefiting in some way or another from this rising energy prices. And overall, I think it is also a very sad time in terms of global economy, because trust is running low. We are seeing a lot of retraction from this whole globalization, and the constant recurrence or in some way the possibility of a conflict only raises fear, even in terms of investment. And I agree with my fellow panelists who mentioned that a lot of these strikes on business hubs like Dubai does also in some way escalate this fear. So it doesn't really need a conflict escalation for the fear to escalate.
I want to thank my two brilliant panelists, Dr. Asta Chadha and Professor David K. Johnston, for joining us. Unfortunately, that's all that we have time for. Of course, we'll be back after a short break, continuing to cover this ever-developing situation.